Remember last Friday when President Obama held that news conference to offer a 4-point plan for making NSA programs more transparent? He said something during the Q&A which had the benefit of being technically true for almost a whole week.
If you look at the reports, even the disclosures that Mr. Snowden's put forward, all the stories that have been written, what you're not reading about is the government actually abusing these programs and listening in on people's phone calls or inappropriately reading people's emails. What you're hearing about is the prospect that these could be abused.
So just focus on what President Obama was talking about there. He was talking about what we were hearing about these programs, what we were reading about the government abusing these programs. And yes, it's true. We weren't reading that until, of course, last night, when the Washington Post's Barton Gellman produced an internal audit and other top-secret documents from that perpetual thorn in the side of U.S. intelligence, Edward Snowden. And contrary to what you just heard the president suggest last week, those documents show that the NSA broke privacy rules thousands of times a year. Gellman writes, quote, the NSA audit obtained by the Post, dated May 2012, counted 2,776 incidents in the preceding 12 months of unauthorized collection, storage, access to, or distribution of legally protected communications, unquote. Gellman adds that most of that was not intentional. Still, the infractions run across a spectrum from outright law-breaking to typos that wrongly led to phone and email intercepts on Americans and foreign targets in the U.S. I want to bring in the man who broke the story, Barton Gellman, who is with the Washington Post, and he revealed these abuses in this story last night. He's also a senior fellow with the Century Foundation. Mr. Gellman, thanks for joining us. Let's try to put this in some perspective. A lot of defenders of the administration are saying 2,776 incidents over basically a one-year period between 2011 and 2012. How much is that really when you look at everything that the NSA does?
Sure. Look, it's a tiny percentage of the data they collect, search, store, et cetera. That's absolutely true. You could look at it another way. You could say that this is a case where the absolute number matters a lot. You know, there are 1 billion passengers a year on airline flights, so we only lose 1% of the luggage, so that's 10 million. So you have to decide whether this really matters absolutely or whether you only care about sort of, A for effort.
Senate Intelligence Committee Chair Dianne Feinstein, who's been criticized a lot for not being enough of a watchdog when it comes to these programs, she released a statement just a short while ago on the report, and let me read part of her statement. She says, quote, the committee has never identified an instance in which the NSA has intentionally abused its authority to conduct surveillance for inappropriate purposes. And she says they've been briefed on these incidents. Now, you were in touch with her office for this story. What's your take on what she says in this statement?
Well, she had a couple of interesting things. The thing about no intentional abuse, she said before, what was new was that she said she thinks that her committee needs to take much more proactive and extensive efforts to find out things that the NSA is not reporting to her.
We just played what the president said last week about NSA abuses when it comes to these surveillance programs. He says there are checks in place to prevent these abuses. Do you think the president knew about this audit when he made those comments? How do his remarks line up with your reporting of these thousands of incidents of rules being broken?
Well, he certainly knew what the figures were, whether he'd seen this particular audit or not, and his staff knew that I was getting close to doing the story. I think I'd call attention to two other words than you did in his statement, which is inappropriately reading people's emails, and also abuse. He defines abuse apparently quite narrowly, which is, someone stalking their ex-wife, someone, looking for a movie star. If the employee at the NSA is trying to do her job, makes mistakes or cuts some corners or does the other things that led to these things, that's not abuse as they see it.
It's remarkable also just because there are people who are covering these stories, you, me, Glenn Greenwald, Spencer Ackerman, a million others, and he's obviously parsing these words. He's obviously choosing his words very carefully.
Well, that's for sure true. Look, here's another way they know the numbers. They do report the aggregate numbers to Congress twice a year. And when you try to get these reports under Freedom of Information, they have a headline, statistical data involving compliance incidents, then everything else below that is blacked out. And then there's a characterization. There were a small number of incidents. So they're not prepared to let us decide by reading ourselves what's small and what's not.
Lastly, Barton, Senators Ron Wyden and Mark Udall just released a statement that said, quote, we believe Americans should know that this confirmation, the story that you wrote and the administration confirming it, is just the tip of a larger iceberg. So bottom line, Barton, with everything you've seen, do you think there's any sort of cover-up of any specific abuses of the surveillance program being carried out by the NSA?
I have no reason to think there are abuses in the stalking your ex category that I was talking about before, although who knows. So cover up, maybe not the right word, but obfuscate is certainly the right word. I just talked about the statistics. They have done everything they can to avoid any particular granular information about what they do from coming into a public debate that the president said he welcomed.
Bart Gellman, thank you so much. Keep up the fantastic work.